Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm Stephanie Dedder, and I'm chairing this track all day. This session is mobile learning, so I hope everyone is here for that. If you're not, now is your chance to get yourself to the right room. So we've got a great session today. Mobile learning is something that I think now features on most people's strategy, and what we've got is a session that's going to cover the kind of, I suppose, the theory, some of the key decisions, the common pitfalls to avoid, how to get it right, and then a real practical example of how this has been done well. So a great session. Just a little bit of housekeeping. In terms of questions, we're going to hear both presentations and then save all questions for the end. So if you can just kind of keep them ready for the end, we'll keep about 15 minutes for that, so there'll be plenty of time. If you need the Wi-Fi code, it's LTConf14. And the hashtag, if you're tweeting for this session, is T2S1, so track 2 session 1, just so that people can follow that. So that is enough from me. Our first speaker has a job that I'm very jealous of, and I think most people will be. So he described his role to me as being paid to play and experiment, which sounds brilliant. Terence Eden works in the lab, which is an innovation hub within Telefonica. And I think we're going to hear some really great advice from the results of all that experimentation. So please welcome Terence.
Hello. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here. So you've read, hopefully, quite a lot about me by now. So I need to find out a little about you. So if you'd all please stand up. Yes, I'm one of those presenters. Okay, thinking about the phone that you use most often, would you please sit down if you're an iPhone user? Okay. And now sit down if you're an Android user primarily. Right, what have we got left? Sit down if you are a BlackBerry user. Oh, Windows Phone 7 user. Symbian? No? Go on, you're going to have to tell me what. No, I made a mistake. Windows 7, there we go. Sir? Okay, a Windows, sit down. Well done. Thank you ever so much for that. So, I'm sure you've all had the experience at some time, or you're about to have the experience, that your boss is going to blunder into your office at some point and say, "We need an app!" It's very common. Everyone had this experience? Yeah? Next time this happens, I want you to treat this in exactly the same way as if a small child were to run up to you and say, "I want a puppy!" Because it's exactly the same mentality that's going on there. So, let's roll this back a bit. What is an app? This is a question to you. What is an app? Someone give me an answer. We'll be here a long time. A program. A downloadable thing on a web page? Not a web page. We all use apps, right? We've all downloaded at least one app. What is an app? Something which gets you somewhere quicker. That's a good example. A piece of functionality. It's kind of hard to describe. The thing is, there's loads of different sorts of apps. Just like, and I'm stretching the metaphor here, there are loads of different sorts of puppies. When someone says, "I want a dog," well, you've got to say, do you want a hunting dog, a sports dog, a working dog, one of those dogs which you just carry around in a bag and it sort of yaps everywhere. And it's exactly the same with apps. There's lots of different functionality that you can have within an app. So just saying we want an app doesn't tell you much. The other thing, when someone sort of bounds up and says, "I want a puppy" or "I want an app," is they're thinking about one thing and one thing only, which is this. Everyone's got an iPhone, right? No, everyone does not have an iPhone. As we've just demonstrated, at least half the room here don't. Some people don't know what phones they've got, but not everyone has. Not everyone has an iPhone. It's very tempting to say, "We need an app, we need an iPhone app," but you need to start thinking of your user base. So I work for Telefonica, who run O2 in the UK. This is a selection of all the different phones we sold during 2013. And this is just a selection because I literally couldn't fit them all on the page. What have we got there? We've got some, I love my laser pointer. We've got some Windows, we've got some BlackBerry, we've got the new BlackBerry, the old BlackBerry, we've got Nokia Asher, still very popular, Androids. There's loads and loads of different phones on the market. And if you only take one piece of advice away from this talk today, it's this: speak to your users. Actually go out and find what phones they are using. If you go, well, we'll make an iPhone app first because iPhone's where the majority of the market are, you're likely to miss a huge swathe of your population, your potential audience. So we've got lots of different phones, we've got lots of different functionality, and I did say in the description I'd tell you sort of how much it costs to build an app, and the answer is it costs as much as you want to pay. If you want to pay $100 for an app, that's fine, you'll get a $100 app. If you want to pay $100,000, you can pay $100,000. Because it costs a lot of money to test on each of these different devices, to build an app specifically for each device. So what can we do to solve this problem? Well, I'm sure you've all heard of the new savior in the mobile world, which is, anyone? HTML5. You're going to hear lots of people saying, HTML5, HTML5. What is HTML5? Again, this is a question for you. Someone, what is HTML5? That's a very good definition which tells us absolutely nothing. Yes, Hypertext Markup Language 5. So HTML5 is the new language for the web, and it enables all sorts of app-type things. It lets web pages play sound, play video, vibrate, access your phone book, send text messages, all sorts of brilliant things. But hang on, let's take a step back. We can build apps in a web language, and they'll work on every phone. So why aren't we just building websites? Let's take a look at what the Cabinet Office have to say. I'm a big fan of the Cabinet Office. This is one of their big manifesto pieces, which is standalone mobile apps will only be considered once a core web service works as well on mobile devices, and if specifically agreed with the Cabinet Office. It's probably true. But that's what they're saying, is that why are we building apps if our websites don't work properly? Why, if we can build stuff in HTML5 which works on phones, why aren't we building that to work on the web and get an app-like experience? Now, just let that ponder for a moment. I'm going to talk about one of the other pitfalls of designing apps, which is we like to think that we're brilliant. Hands up if you think you're brilliant. Everyone does. Of course we're brilliant. And what we produce is brilliant. And this is what we think our mobile apps are like. We're just going to put it out and it's going to be done, or we're going to put out a mobile learning app and it will be brilliant and we will never need to touch it again. Not so. This is Tetris. This is the very first screen. This is a screenshot of the very first game of Tetris. And it's just about recognizable. But it's not the Tetris that you play on your iPhone, it's not the Tetris you play on your PlayStation or on your Game Boy or anything else. Every time a new piece of technology has come out, Tetris has to be updated, and it's the simplest game. It's just blocks falling from the sky. And yet every time there's been a new piece of technology, Tetris has had to update. When you develop an app, you are also going to have to update as well, which means a continual cost. Because you may have heard about iOS 7 coming out recently. It's a brand new version of the iPhone operating system, which meant lots of people had to update their apps at very short notice and to Apple's timescale, not to your timescale, to someone else's timescale. There's another problem with apps, which is it's really quite depressing to think about. So I'm going to bring the temperature of the room just down a little bit. Nobody likes you. You don't have any friends. I can't do it as well as this chap, but nobody likes you. You don't have any friends. Why would someone want to download your app? I'm serious. Why? This commenter on the internet said, I don't spend, talking about the government, I don't spend much time interacting with the government. I do my tax return once a year. Why do I want an app for a tax return? I book my driving test once in my lifetime. Why do I want an app for that? I'm going to go on a learning course. Why do I want an app? Why do I want to spend time downloading it, filling up my memory, having it updating every 5 days and flashing alerts at me? Why do I want that? Let's take a quick straw poll. There's an app for the Learning Technologies Conference. I've seen it advertised outside. Can you put your hands up if you've downloaded that app? That's a good proportion. Well done. Put your hands up if you didn't. That's also about, I'd say about a third didn't. And here you are sort of Sorry? If the Wi-Fi had worked, this is something we'll get onto. Not everywhere has the functionality to use your app. If your app relies heavily on Wi-Fi or on data, and if you're on one of the millions of houses which has no access to the internet or has no access to Wi-Fi, your app doesn't work. So there's another issue with apps, which is very different from the web, and that is the one of gatekeepers. So if you want to develop an app for Android, that will be $25 that you need to pay to Google. That's $25 once. And at any point, Google can say, we don't want your app in our app store anymore, and delete it. And if they really don't like it, they can delete it from users' phones. That's usually in the case that it's malicious, but you are reliant on the good grace of Google there. If you want to develop for an iPhone, it costs $99 per year just to get into the iTunes store. It takes on average 4 to 6 weeks for your app to be approved. So if you need to get an app out there ready to hit a deadline, you're waiting on a gatekeeper. You're waiting on Apple to sit there and say, yes, we approve this. And if they don't approve it, and they reject you entirely, that's it. All of your development costs gone out the window. Think very carefully before you enter into developing an app to make sure that you actually can afford it and that you are going to get past these gatekeepers. There are similar gatekeepers for BlackBerry and for Nokia and for Windows as well, with similar sorts of costs. So here are some questions to ask. I don't like text-heavy slides, but there's no real good way to do this. So I'm just going to read these out to you. Does your web service already work on mobile? If not, why not? If you can't even get the basics right, why are you spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on an app? What is the user need that only an app can provide? What is it that an app can do that the web can't, especially with HTML5, which makes you think, we need an app? What is the unique property that you're going to take advantage of that justifies you using an app? Are there existing apps? And if so, why would anyone download yours? Is yours going to be that much better than everyone's app? Will the user want to use it often? That's the key question. If this is an app which someone downloads, they use once and then delete, was it worth it? What devices will they want to use on? I think this is probably the most important, is that if you want to target all your learners, you need to target all the phones possible, and all the tablets, and maybe even internet-connected TVs, and maybe soon Google Glass, and who knows what in the future. And finally, what is the total lifetime cost of the app? And that's a very important one, because as we've talked about, you're going to continually have to update this app for new technologies that comes around. Now, I talked there about competition. It's very easy to get lost in what competition is. You might think that the other company which provides training is your competitor. They're not. This is your competition. If I have got an Angry Birds icon on my phone and I've got your app's icon on my phone, which one am I going to click? Why would I go to your app rather than playing Angry Birds? This is your competition. The other piece of competition you have, especially if you're targeting young people, is interruption. This is the average number of texts sent and received per month. This is US. If you look at teenagers, or to 24, that's 3,000 to 4,000 texts per month. That's, someone do the math, but it's like 100 a day. That's crazy. And that's not including emails. That's not including Facebook messages or BBM or WhatsApp or any number of 100 things, which means whenever someone is using your app, at any point, they are almost guaranteed to have a little buzz, which is going to take them out of the app into a different context, and then they're going to have to switch back. Why will they switch back? Is your app engaging enough for them? And talking about engagement and talking about speed, we like to think of learners as sort of sitting down sometimes. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to spend half an hour learning. I'm going to spend half an hour doing a task. In actual fact, do you know where the most popular place to use an app is? I don't see anyone here shaking their head saying, I've never used an app on this. Does your app provide quick enough access to content that someone can use it on the loo, or on a train, or on a bus, or somewhere else? The other thing we have to think about That was 15 seconds. If someone says to you when you're designing apps, so we'll sort of put up a splash screen, it'll stay there for about 10 seconds while the data downloads. You think, oh, 10 seconds, 15 seconds? It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're sitting there waiting, it feels like an eternity, especially when at any moment you can switch back to Angry Birds or switch to your web browser or have a conversation via text. Speed is of the essence. Study after study have shown that after about 5 seconds, people go, not working. After about 10 seconds, they go, and after 12 seconds, you've lost them. If your app doesn't respond within 15 seconds, it's pointless. I mean, there is literally no one who will use it because they will sit there and go, this app isn't working. Angry Birds starts in less than 15 seconds, and that's more complicated than your app, I would hope. So that's an interesting psychological trick, though, isn't it? That you can sort of tell someone, can you just wait there 15 seconds? And you think there's no time, but it actually does feel like a chunk of time. There are other psychological tricks which we can use to grab people's attention, and these are very important. Psychologists do a lot of work on colour theory, which is what are the colours that people are attracted to. So you want your app to stand out from all the other apps on your phone. So you go and you take a look at colour charts, you take a look at psychological journals, and they tell you bright blue. If your app is bright blue, it will stand out from all the other apps on your phone. I mean, this isn't made up. Take a look through your phone, once you've finished, and just see how many bright blue apps you find. It's absolutely incredible. So think about, when someone says, we need a way to stand out, are you standing out in exactly the same way that everyone else is? We like to think that, we are all individuals. Yes, we are all individuals. And this is where I sort of bring it back to the puppy metaphor again, which dogs are great, aren't they? They're so much fun, and you can play with them, and they do stuff, and they're a hell of a lot of hard work, and they make a mess absolutely everywhere, and you need to spend, a fortune on making them better, and getting them new things when they grow out of things, and that's exactly what an app is like. Think right back to someone saying, I want an app, I want a puppy. Well, are you going to take it for a walk every day? Are you going to maintain it? What are you going to do when you get bored of it? Are you going to give the puppy away? What happens when you decide, you know what, we're not doing our app anymore, it didn't get the traction you want, and you've still got a few thousand users using it, or people who've paid for it? What happens then? Can you just abandon it? What happens when you say, well, we've got one dog, we might as well get two? Well, we've got the Android app, we need an iPhone app. Are you prepared to take on that level of responsibility? So I entitled this talk provisionally, An App is for Life, because it is. Once you've made that commitment, and once you've sunk all of those costs and all that time into it, and if you're left with something which just shits on the rug, no one is going to be very happy with you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Wow, that was quite a whirlwind, I think. And I think now any parent who's ever said no to a child asking for a puppy is well equipped to go into the next app meeting. So as I said before, if you can just hold questions, I'm sure there are a lot of them, but hold them till after we've heard from all our speakers. So our next speakers work for a local education training board within the NHS, responsible for e-learning, mobile learning and other technology-enhanced learning. So Helen Bingham is Library and E-Learning Resources Manager. Alison Potter is E-Learning Programme Manager. And we're going to be hearing about their story of turning theory and research into a successful mobile learning strategy. So I think we're all ready, and please welcome Alison and Helen.
We hope this won't take more than 15 seconds.
While we're waiting for the presentation to switch over, maybe we've got time for one question to Terence. If anyone's got one, I'm just going to bring the microphone down. So I'm going to come to you because you're the closest to the front.
Easiest victim. Yeah, I'd just be interested to hear a couple of apps that you might have developed. I'm not quite sure whether you're actually in learning and development or design or whatever, but particularly if you've done any learning and development apps within Otis/Telefonica that you're particularly proud of, and your worst.
So a lot of the apps we develop are for internal use, so I can't go into too many specifics, but one of the things that we've been looking at is video chatting as a method of learning. So if you've got a trainer who's in one call centre and you've got several other people who are elsewhere, how we can make use of one-to-one video chats or one-to-many video chats. So, could we deliver a talk like this with one person sort of holding their phone there and other people sitting and looking at it? Otherwise, it's very hard to retain people's engagement if it's not live or if you're not tracking people, essentially. That's one of the problems we had with an earlier app, which was we expected people to go to it, complete the learning modules, and then at the end of the week would say, how have you done? And of course we got to the end of the week and people said, oh, I forgot to do it. So we were looking at ways that we can sort of push notifications to people to say, you haven't done your learning objective for this day, you need to do it now, or there's a problem. But we're also experimenting with audio as well, which not a lot of apps use. So, big in file size, no. When you're using speech as audio, it's actually very small. So we can stream voice real time, or just have it stored on the phone, which is great because it really does engage people. Sometimes people don't want to watch video because that's quite active, but they're very happy to listen to audio lectures, which means they can then they can do it while they're gardening or on the loo or on a conference call. There's all sorts of different strategies. So you don't need to just be presenting text. Video works quite well. Audio, I think, is brilliant, which is good. Any other questions?
Yeah, we're going to be a couple of minutes. It sounds like an excuse, but the computer just froze. So we can take a few questions.
Try turning it off and on again.
While you were talking, I was thinking most of your things that are downsides to apps apply just as well, if not more so, to websites. Mm-hmm. Do you have any comment on that? Because I think you're just saying life is difficult.
I think one of the things to note is, yes, if people are using the web on I'll make this quick, if they're using it on their phone, they've got the same level of distractions, but there's lower overheads for you. It's generally cheaper to develop a website than it is to develop custom apps for lots of different platforms. And it also means that you're not interfering with the user's phone as much, which it turns out quite a lot of users resent. But I'm happy to answer that in more detail after this one.
Great, thank you. So sorry about that delay, and we'll take more questions at the end for all our speakers. So if we can just welcome again Alison and Helen.
Good morning. I'm Helen.
And I'm Alison.
And as Stephanie mentioned, we work for the NHS, a part of the NHS that covers the central south part of England, about 100,000 staff in total. For the last 3 or 4 years, we've been on a mobile learning journey. The blurb about our presentation says it had been considered, and in reality it's been a little bit stop-start, have a rethink. But like clinical staff in the NHS, we try to be reflective practitioners and apply evidence-based practice. So Alison and I have tried to do the same. We're not experts, far from it, but we certainly know more now than we did when we started, so we're very happy to share our experience with you and answer any questions that you may have at the end. Thank you. So our challenge is that 40% of the healthcare workforce now work outside hospital settings, and that's a percentage that's likely to increase. In addition, another trend is that healthcare is increasingly provided by a wide range of organisations, public sector, private sector, third sector, large and small, with all sorts of different learning management systems, or sometimes no learning management system. Our challenge is to make sure that that increasingly dispersed and very diverse workforce have ready access to training at a time and place that suits them. And that's both role-specific training and statutory mandatory training, which is obviously a high priority for the NHS and a real burden for the NHS. So online learning via desktop PC obviously plays a role, but it's only half a solution for those based in the community who often don't have access to a desktop PC, but of course do increasingly have access to either a work issue or a personal issue mobile device. Where to start though? Despite what the blurb said about us being considered in our approach, we recently reflected, Alison and I, that if we'd started out to write a strategy for mobile learning, we'd probably still be writing it now. As it happens, we were pushed. Our manager is one, I'm not sure if he actually likes puppies, but he definitely likes shiny. And he really wanted us to demonstrate that we could create something shiny. So never mind the business case and the evidence, we had to jump straight in.
Okay, so we started by building 2 apps to showcase the potential of mobile learning to the organisations that we work with. Both of these apps were about 40 minutes worth of learning, highly structured content. On reflection, probably quite a long time on the toilet, that is. It was based on content from existing e-learning that we had. We externally commissioned it, and it took about 8 weeks to build from inception to launch. Now that's with existing content, I must stress. Within their first month of launch, they attracted over 10,000 downloads, which superficially sounds absolutely great, but we still didn't actually know what number of those 10,000 were our target audience, how many of those were NHS staff. So we still didn't actually know what the real appetite for mobile learning was in the NHS, let alone if anyone wanted to do their compliance training that way.
So being reflective and evidence-based practitioners, we decided we needed some evidence, and in 2010 we commissioned Brighton-based company Epic to undertake some research for us into the benefits and challenges of mobile learning for the NHS. And because of the importance to us of statutory mandatory compliance training and assessment, we particularly wanted them to focus on the role that mobile learning had in that area. The research methodology that Epic used was very rigorous, peer-reviewed. It included a randomised survey of some 250 staff working in different roles in different types of NHS organisation. It involved focus groups, it involved telephone interviews. We wanted opinion and feedback from people working in the field at local, regional and national level. And the resulting report, which is available online, considerably furthered our understanding and knowledge of the enormous potential for mobile learning for the NHS. The NHS as a whole, not just our part of it. It concluded with 27 benefits and 22 challenges for mobile learning for the NHS and a comprehensive set of recommendations. The headlines for us were big appetite for mobile learning amongst the NHS across all age groups. Big challenge of integrating mobile learning into NHS IT infrastructures. And just an aside, from that survey, we estimated that at that time 35% of our workforce had access to a phone or a device that would be suitable for mobile learning, and they were using a very wide range of different device types.
Okay, so this meant that we were able to make the case for further investment in mobile learning. So we invested in a further app, this time for a statutory and mandatory topic, and we chose health and safety. Again, we commissioned it from an external provider, again from Epic, but this time we created the content from scratch. So in comparison, this app actually took us 6 months to develop from start to finish. The content includes video, animations and formative assessment in the form of quizzes. Again, it's highly structured. Again, it takes about 40 minutes from start to finish if you were to sit there from start to finish and do it. But it's designed in such a way that people can dip in and out of the bits that they want as and when they require it. With one particular hospital trust, we piloted this with an additional feature, and that additional feature was a summative assessment that had the results tracked back to a learning management system. So the idea with that was that actually we'd be able to capture people's, hopefully, that they've achieved their competency in health and safety, and they could either access the content from start to finish, do all of that, and then the assessment, or just dive straight into the assessment itself and hopefully be successful and gain their competency in that particular area. This particular app was piloted with a trust that was a community mental health hospital trust. So that particular trust was fairly widely dispersed workforce across numerous sites. So it was the typical site and audience that we would want to, or you'd envisage would benefit quite hugely from it.
Unfortunately, though, the uptake of that app and you doing online assessments using the devices was disappointing. I don't know whether in hindsight we might have been just a little bit ahead of ourselves on that, but that's our manager sort of noticing the tarnish on the shiny. And this is one of the factors that triggered us to ask EPIC to do a repeat of our research. The other reason, of course, was that in 18 months, it's a very long time in the ever-changing mobile space, and it's a super long time in the ever-reorganising NHS. So EPIC did a research refresh using exactly the same methodology as before to capture change over time, and we also asked them to capture feedback about the value and the impact of our existing apps, because we developed several by that time. The 2012 research report, I'd also commend that to you. It's packed full of interesting insights. In a nutshell, over that period, there'd been a marked increase in enthusiasm for learning by mobile device, although interestingly, appetite for using mobiles for quick reference and decision support was even higher, which I think bears out what Terence has said. Increase in ownership of smartphones was now 50%. I mean, you may think that's perhaps a bit low, but I think it's worth bearing in mind that the NHS workforce, a high proportion are over 45. I even older than I am. And I think that's probably changed. That, since 2012, that will have gone up. One thing that hasn't changed, which was identified as being a significant barrier, was that Wi-Fi access in NHS workplaces is still very patchy, and there really still aren't any supportive HR or IT policies in place. The NHS uses lots of acronyms, but BYOD, bring your own device, isn't one of them that's in common use. The most sobering finding for us was that of all the people that were asked in research, very few had actually heard about our apps. They weren't even aware of them, so it wasn't possible for EPIC to get useful feedback for us on the usage of them. The recommendations in the report, I'd really commend them to you. There is a handout at the back about them, and we'll also provide the link, obviously, after the conference. They're clustered usefully under headings of design, deployment, technology, publicity. These are some of the really obvious ones that I don't think would surprise any of you. Pilot and test with a range of your potential users, involve them in the process of developing the app. That lot looks suspiciously homogenous. Our workforce is quite a bit more diverse than that, but it's an important message. Another fairly obvious one is deploy to multiple devices. And again, Terence very eloquently made that point. And for us, that definitely has to include to deploy to desktop as well. We're often asked whether the content of our mobile learning is also available by PC. They say, this is great on an app, but actually, can we have it by PC as well? Use mobile learning as an option and part of a blend. I think you all know that. Mobile learning isn't for everybody, that's for sure. Bundle with reference resources and on the back of other mobile initiatives. Those are taking place a lot in the NHS at the moment in patient care context. And perhaps above all, for us, work harder at promotion. That might be something that some of you cracked, but it's certainly been a hard lesson learned for us. Overall, that research gave us evidence for strong support and great growth potential for mobile learning in the NHS, so we kind of forged it.
Okay. So the increase in demand for new apps that we were getting, coupled with the fact that we had to maintain our existing apps, meant that we actually needed to look for a more flexible and cost-effective solution. So at this point in our journey, we actually decided to invest in an authoring tool and try and do it ourselves in-house. So using the lessons from our research, we tested key design features for these new apps that we built ourselves. We tested the key design features with users and expert focus groups as part of that development process. At the same time, we also used that opportunity to ask those users how we might best promote these apps to staff within their organisation. So we got quite context-specific ideas about how we would promote each of these particular apps out in their organisations, things that we hadn't even thought of before. Doing it ourselves, it did prove to be cheaper than outsourcing, only marginally really. It was just over £3,000 less to do it ourselves. For us, really, the greatest value is the greatest cost really is in the expertise that we get from the clinicians for these particular apps. So there's never really any saving there as such. But the value in doing it ourselves meant that we could actually maintain and be a bit more flexible with the development process. It also meant that we could actually provide the tool to learning and development professionals out and staff out in organisations as well, so they could use the tool to create their own particular apps. So all of this activity really is a result of growing demand for mobile learning in our area and an expectation for that.
Indeed, and the requests that we receive now for apps far outstrips our capacity to deliver. Everyone wants a puppy. But what's interesting in terms of mobile learning is the expectation and requirement that all the learning that we commission, whether externally or develop in-house, has to be made available in tablet format. So NHS staff and trainees and students expect to have that option, and employers know that if they offer that option, it greatly increases the chance that the trainees or the staff member will do the training in a timely way. So no longer a nice to do, but a have to do.
Okay, so to date, all of our apps have been native apps. Thankfully, they're not all blue. I'm really pleased about that. So to date, all of our apps have been native apps. They've been built for specific devices, so Apple, Android, and BlackBerry versions. This has proved really costly to do it this way, having to build for specific devices, not only the specific devices, but the different, the whole plethora of smartphones and tablets that we've just seen on Terence's presentation are just a few. because that's growing, and also their associated platforms means that it's very hard to keep up with all of those changes. As well, we've been very much beholden to the changes in policy. For example, with Apple, their policy changes for how you submit something to App Store, we've been completely beholden to. So for us, we've been at this point in our journey for the last few months actually thinking, right, we now need to divorce from this device-specific development process and leave the native app development behind and potentially look to developing web apps instead. Although we rationalised this ourselves after quite a bit of pain and quite a bit of cost over a couple of years, actually the pan-government digital spending controls have also now stipulate that. So we've kind of reached a conclusion there, which is good.
We thought about ourselves, not because the Cabinet Office told us.
but it's kind of good that it's supported. So I mean, basically for us, we believe that our mobile learning is going to be more effective and more flexible, and it's going to be more cost-effective for us to go down the HTML5 web app route. So for us, we'll be able to develop stuff hopefully quicker and easier and republish our stuff quicker, and we won't be beholden to Apple's policies. With deploying our content in a web app way, we're hoping that obviously we'll be able to create content once and then deploy it out to multiple devices as well. So we won't have to create a separate PC version and a separate mobile version. The biggest nut for us still to crack as we set off on this web app journey for us, the biggest nut for us will be being able to make our mobile learning trackable as well. That was quite a big thing that came out in the research, is that having mobile learning is great, but our organisations want to be able to track that learning is taking place. For us, we think that the cloud solutions are going to be able to provide the answer to this and provide us with the ability to track our mobile learning and as well as our e-learning. We're now using Rusticy's SCORM Cloud solution to deploy our e-learning content out to multiple learning management systems that our hospital trusts are using. This enables us to provide content to their systems how they want it, and have it trackable on their local system, but trackable to us centrally on the cloud, so we can justify further investment. We believe that by creating our web app HTML5 content, we can actually deploy it from the cloud out to people that don't use LMSs and still have it trackable, out to all the different LMSs, Moodle, Oracle, whatever they are, as well as via web and mobile devices. And also have all this trackable in the same location. It does future-proof us for the tin can world too, as well, and we're beginning to embark upon that journey, and hopefully what we'll be able to do by rolling out in this way is be able to track not only learning completions, but learning experiences as well that are taking place via these devices and modes.
Okay, so just finally to share with you the main things that we think we've learned so far, just three really, that our research indicates there's really clear evidence of need. As I said earlier, mobile learning now a must do, not just a nice to do, as an option and part of a blend. Can't emphasise that bit enough. Not to be deceived by download flattery, as we were, and our boss was. You need to work hard at promotion and check that your apps are reaching your target learners. And well, this is a cliche really, but because we don't know what's around the corner in this fast-moving world, we have to be future-proofed and we have to be flexible. And as Alison explained, for us in our business at this time, we think that HTML5 and the cloud are the way to go, and that may or may not be the same for you and your audiences. So, hopefully we've kept time. and hopefully you found that interesting. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Alison and Helen. So before we take questions, I just want to reiterate something that was mentioned, which is that there is a handout available. There was quite a lot of statistics and kind of data mentioned. So if you want to pick that up near the back, there's a few copies there on your way out. So we've now got about 10 minutes or so to continue questions. So if you just pop your hands up, we need to get everything on the microphone, so I'm going to run around to you as quick as I can.
Thank you. Helen and Alison, I was wondering, an interesting juxtaposition there between the demand for apps, and yet that second lot of research showed a disappointing uptake. What are you doing to counter the overall shiny toy impression that everybody, if you ask them if they like mobile learning, then yes, because it's new and interesting, and the latest thing about learning that some people may have heard about. How are you countering that?
I think you're absolutely right. People tick to say that they want it without really knowing what it is, and then the reality is slightly different. We think that the reason that uptake was less good than we had anticipated was really, well, two things really. Poor Wi-Fi access, and mental health community trust, it's the worst. And also just a little bit of a lack of confidence that an assessment that gets tracked to your learning record that you do on a mobile device is actually, that's going to work. So those were the issues that we feel that we need to reassure people about. They need to have absolute confidence in the Wi-Fi connectivity issue. So, and I think that, I hope that will start to change. And also, I genuinely feel that all the future workforce that are coming through the system and expecting of this will be, really mean it when they say that this is what they want.
It would be interesting to see if you repeat the research in another couple of years, if you're seeing that change kind of come through. Okay, if you can pass the microphone across.
Hi. How safety critical is the information you put into your apps? So, for example, my next bypass operation, will the surgeon have downloaded the app? In that, I mean, you're giving out information, right? I do the same with my web apps. I have a high voltage course, but it's something that they download before they come on the day's training, because I wouldn't want my engineers playing around with high voltage unless they'd actually done something practical. So how safety critical is the information that you're giving out? Are you having any other thing after they've given out the information? Because there's some information which is just information, yeah, great. The door opens this way, don't open the other way. And then there's other stuff that, frankly, I wouldn't want to rely on mobile learning, but it certainly can cut the corners off someone who's coming to a training course at a later date. Have you had that sort of, how have you addressed that type of problem, if you've even had that type of problem?
Your phrase was safe critical there. I suppose with the health and safety one, for example, that's just it's an option amongst other options. So if they should be doing that before they're actually out in practice. So either they've got the option of attending a classroom session, or they've got the mobile learning option, or they've got an e-learning option. And that's handled by the local learning and development departments to make sure that that person has achieved and attended either one of those particular options. I think.
Yeah, for sort of patient critical learning, we wouldn't rely on mobile learning as being the key means to deliver that. The apps that we've done are, I guess, largely it's about refresher training. If you want to look something up quickly. We've started developing apps which are more decision support type apps, again, based on the research, but that's what people want. And there you have to be super careful that actually it's not something that be classed as a medical device. So you have to build in some caveats about, it still being the individual user's professional responsibility when they're applying the knowledge or the decision that the app has come up with for them. But I mean, it's a really good question. But because we stay on the learning side rather than the clinical decision support side, in a way that's a safer place to be, I think.
There's another aspect to that which is quite interesting, which is you can't put a password on an app store, which means if you put out a brain surgery app, for example, anyone can download that. Now, maybe that's not a problem, but maybe it is. If you're trying to say, well, here is the learning module for this highly classified piece of equipment or this internal-only thing, you don't want every Tom, Dick and Harry downloading it from iTunes or from Android. So that can also play a part in if you're dealing with safety critical or confidential stuff, whether you go down the app route.
I'm just going to a couple more questions at the back, and then I'll come back over to the front.
My question would be about the linking the application or the learning to an LMS system. How can usually, in general, I mean, in any learning, mobile learning, is this something doable? Because the way I see here, all the learnings are standalone learnings, but are not complementing an overall development for employees, for example, or something.
So you're asking if you can connect an app to an LMS that you already have?
Like a SCORM thing or something.
The answer is, well, that we found is yes, if your LMS already supports it. So you might need to speak to your provider about how you actually go about connecting it. But all the ones I've found will let apps or websites or something similar connect back. I don't know if you've found...
Yes, except for the primary one that's used in the NHS.
Except for that.
Except for that one, yes. So that's what we did with our health and safety app, just via an API, fairly straightforward process.
I guess that picks up on your earlier point about the challenge being more about people trusting that link than the actual technology. Some questions over here.
I just had a quick observation on the security one, the heart bypass. We have almost the opposite problem, which is we have in our organisation we deliver legal training, compulsory legal kind of compliance training, and the people who run that training are terrified of putting their words down in evidence in any kind of format, because it's possible then if they missed something critical and we get sued, that it can be traced all the way back to failings in the delivery of their compulsory training, whereas if it's just spoken, nobody's got accurate evidence of exactly what happened. So I just had a question back to Terence on, you were talking about how important it is to learn from your users and observe your users. And in this whole app versus HTML5 piece, we found very, very different behaviors in different nations. So just same story as you, corporate kind of outreach to our employees. Very different use patterns in India, in China, in Europe. I was wondering if you had any experience like that, or if it's sort of...
Yeah, well, the first thing to say is you should be analysing your users. So whether that's on web and you're using Omniture or Google Analytics, or whether you're on mobile and you're using Flurry or something like that, you should be tracking what your users are doing and critically what they're not doing. Is anyone actually clicking on the terms and conditions link? Probably not. But is anyone actually clicking on their help page? Do people in certain countries rather do different things? You will find that different people in different cultures will approach learning in vastly different ways, and this just goes back to user-centric design. And sometimes you do need to say, well, I mean, it could be something as simple as people read left to right in English and right to left in other languages. So do we need to redesign the app so that the menu is on the right rather than the left? Because otherwise you'll find that people are continually trying to find a menu, but they can't because it's not what they expect. So you're absolutely right. Different people have different expectations, but track them. I mean, it's a bit Big Brother-ish, but I hope you're all using web analytics at the moment and seeing which parts of your website are succeeding, which are failing, or not succeeding as well. You should be doing the same with your apps.
Thank you.
Hi there. So this is new to me. I'm venturing into the world of mobile apps, mobile learning. So I've got a very large audience, and they can be absolutely anybody and everybody. And what we know already is that the very varying availability to Wi-Fi or the internet generally is a bit of a problem. And the idea of a native app or an offline content is very attractive to us because it means, of course, that we can have them downloading it overnight. Are you anticipating moving over to HTML and cloud-based sort of deployment, that content will still be available offline?
Yeah, that's our very, very vain hope. And we recognise that is one of the big issues with making that decision to move from native to web. And even if we didn't make that decision ourselves, we're still going to have to anyway because of the digital spending controls. But in fact, we've got a meeting this afternoon with suppliers downstairs to actually understand how we might be able to make that possible. Apparently, it is possible to make HTML5 content available offline and then have it trackable when you revisit a Wi-Fi zone. We haven't learnt about that yet. But
so yeah,
it's
it definitely is possible with HTML5. It's slightly tricky, and you can't download gigabytes of data to a phone, but you can do it. But yeah, it's a real problem. It's worth taking a look at. Ofcom produce a wonderful set of statistics. One of them's a map of the UK, and there's a red dot with every home which doesn't have any mobile access whatsoever. Nothing from O2 or Voda or anyone else, and it's shocking. Not all rural communities either. So it's worth thinking about that. If you desperately need an offline thing, HTML5 might not be the right way to go, or even apps might not be the right way to go. Back to DVDs.
I think we've got time for one more question, but it has to be a quick one. So if someone's got a brief question, that's a hand here. Okay. Can you
just a point of clarification then, the content that you're developing, is it all publicly available or is it classified for an internal audience? And maybe not now, but I'd love to know if you have ventured into internal audience, how have you tackled it if it's accessed on personal devices?
Who's that for? Us?
NHS. Well, I mean, at the moment, we make, because we publish our apps via the public app stores, they're downloadable by anyone. And actually, there is an argument that as long as it isn't patient identifiable or sensitive information, why not? Freedom of information, sort of culture, we want patients to be well informed. So we haven't had that challenge. I don't know if you want to...
I think that's it really, yeah, they're publicly available at this moment in time.
I mean, we've had the issue for internal training apps, not just training apps, is at the moment we use Android and we can do that for internal stuff. But again, it doesn't stop anyone taking the email which has got the Android attachment and forwarding it on to the world if they want. The solution that we've come up with is passwords, which is when the app first boots up, you have to type in the password of the day or your username and password, and if it doesn't match, which is a bit of a kludge because, people know that the app is there. But yeah, doing things privately is tricky.
So there was a question earlier about kind of tracking and mobile, and I just wanted to mention that Helen and Alison are taking part in one of the learning exchanges downstairs. So that's at 3:15 today, and that's on meeting the challenge of tracking mobile learning. So you might be interested in continuing some of the conversation with them later today. For now, we have run out of time. It's lunchtime now, so as well as enjoying lunch, do take a little bit of time to go and explore the exhibition. And for now, if we can just have a final round of applause for Helen, Alison and Terence.